In this Final Fantasy XIV guide, we're going to discuss attribute points. In this guide in particular, I'm going to discuss pretty much everything there is to know about them. I'm going to go through primary stats, secondary stats, and even crafting and gathering stats in that order. So when it comes to primary stats, you can see what each one does by mousing over it. I'm not going to waste your time by reading, but what I am going to talk about is where you want to put your attribute points, and that's this bonus point allotment screen here. So before I discuss anything further, I wanted to mention that if you messed up or want to change, you can use this, the Keeper's Hymn item, and this actually really comes in handy. And the reason is, you can actually use different point allotments while leveling up and gearing up, as opposed to once you're level 50 with good equipment. So what I'm going to recommend when you're leveling, and when you are still gearing up your character, you're actually going to want to max out Vitality with every character class. And the reason is, when you're leveling up, pretty much the amount of damage you do is not going to be very substantial, but if you die, then the time lost from running back to whatever you were doing is going to more than make up for any little bit of damage you lost by going Vitality over something else. And in early level 50 encounters, like Ifrit, Garuda, or Titan, if you have some extra health, you can actually tank some of the AoE if you mess up. Sorry about that. If you mess up the AoE, which, you know, it's going to happen occasionally, especially as you're learning fights, you can actually live through the encounter, and it's no big deal if you got hit. You know, you waste a little bit of the healer's mana, but in the end, it's not a game breaker, whereas if you wipe on the encounter, you can cause the group to wipe. So max out your Vitality initially, and then use the Keeper's Hymn item to switch over. And in particular, what we want to do is we want to wait until we start getting some of this AF2 or Allagan pieces, because these pieces have so much Vitality. So as an example, my AF2 pants have 33 Vitality. A typical level, item level 60 Amdapor Keep Drop only has 15. So that would be an 18-point Vitality upgrade. So if you have this across several pieces, you have so much Vitality, you just don't need it all. Like, I have over 4,000 health as a bard, and that's about all you need. Once you have 4,000, any extra health is not really going to increase your survivability very much. Whereas that extra dexterity is going to increase my damage. So what you do is, you wait until you get a couple pieces of Allagan gear or AF2, then you go in your stats and you use that Keeper's Hymn item and move everything over. And here's where you want to move over your points to, depending on class. Strength is for Dragoon and Monk, Dexterity is for Bard, tanks, as in Warriors and Paladins, are actually going to stay in Vitality. You know, that extra health is never, you can never have too much health as a tank. Intelligence is for Black Mage and Summoner, Mind is for White Mage and Scholar. There are some erroneous information out there that the Scholar uses Intelligence for healing. It doesn't. It uses Mind. This does create a bit of an issue for players that want to play both Summoner and Scholar. Maybe they'll fix that, maybe they'll separate them, but right now I believe this is still an active issue, where players either have to pick one or put 15 in each if they want to play both classes. So that's unfortunate, but that's how things work right now. Piety increases mana. No class should have mana issues, so we're actually going to skip this no matter what class you are. Alright, so let's talk about secondary stats. Secondary stats for DPS in particular are somewhat complicated. You've got accuracy, critical hit, determination, and skill speed. Attack power here is increased by your primary stat. So for Bard, 1 point of dexterity is worth 1 point of attack power. And then to complicate matters further, you've got something called physical damage on your weapon. So as it stands now, one way to think about these points is that 1 point of weapon damage is worth significantly more than 1 point of dexterity, or your primary damage stat. 1 point of dexterity is worth significantly more than any secondary stat. So basically, you can almost think of 1 point of weapon damage being worth 5 or 6 points of dexterity, or even more, possibly 10. And you can think of 1 point of dexterity being worth anywhere from 5 to 10 points of another secondary stat. So if you have an item that has 7 dexterity and like no secondary stats, it's almost always worth it to go for that extra dexterity or whatever your primary stat happens to be. And if there's a difference between physical damage and your primary stat, you almost always opt for the physical damage because physical damage really matters. Even Bard, who only gets 1 extra point of physical damage, is about the same upgrade of getting this chest or the AF2 pieces versus spending it on the +1 relic. And what I mean by that is, if you do the calculation, the +1 relic versus the regular relic doesn't get much of a stat upgrade, but it does get a point or 2 of damage. Whereas the Dark Light chest to the AF2 chest is a huge stat point upgrade. And while some number calculators show that if the Bard weapon in particular, you might get benefit from getting a piece or 2 of AF2 first, but in the end, weapon damage usually trumps everything, no matter what class you are. The only exception is for tanking classes, since they actually want to maximize vitality and not damage. Usually they'll go for the AF2 pieces first, just because the relic +1 is so expensive. The extra damage does increase their threat generation, but that's usually not an issue if the tank is good and comparably geared to the DPS. So, now that we know the hierarchy of damage being the most important, primary stat being secondary important, and secondary stats being by far the least important, let's discuss exactly what the best secondary stats are. So, no matter what, if you're a DPS class, I should say, your most important stat is going to be accuracy up until a point. So for physical DPS, you're going to want to, if you raid in the Binding Coil, you're going to want 491, approximately 491 accuracy. Whereas Black Mages and Summoners only need 435. And what this accuracy does is ensures you never miss. Once you hit 491 as a physical damage dealer, every extra point of dexterity or accuracy is a waste. It actually does nothing to increase your damage once you hit the cap. But up until the cap, it's the most important thing. It's particularly important because if you miss an attack, it messes up your DPS rotation. You have to start over because you missed your timers and it's a waste. So you always want to max dexterity first. Or I'm sorry, accuracy. I keep saying dexterity. So after that, though, a lot of it depends on whether or not you want critical hit, determination, or skill speed, or if you're a caster, attack magic potency. Or I'm sorry, if you want those skills, you can't really pick attack magic potency. I meant to say spell speed. So it really depends on your class. So for almost all DPS classes, determination is considered to be the next best stat, but it's hard to get. So accuracy first up to cap, determination next, but the difference between skills, critical hit rate, and skill speed depends on the class. So for Bard, where skill speed doesn't really help my rotation, and it would only make me run out of TP if I had a really high skill speed, this is actually one of my worst stats. This is probably the worst stat. I would take anything over skill speed. Whereas a lot of mages, or even monks, really benefit from spell speed and skill speed because it makes their rotations easier to manage. Like a monk, for example, with faster skill speed is going to be able to more easily maintain Grease Lightning 3. So it really depends on your class. And it also depends on your gear set, what you want to focus on. As you notice, my Bard is well over the accuracy cap. That's not intentional, it's just that every piece of Bard gear has accuracy on it. It's very hard to get away from. And of this piece, the legs are so good for the Bard, they're like one of the best pieces you can get, simply because they have no accuracy instead of determination. So when you're choosing between, this is important because when you're choosing between Allagan pieces and AF2, you want to pick the pieces that maximize your class's damage. So for Bard, any piece like this which has no accuracy is ideal because I'm already over the accuracy cap and it's hard to not be over the accuracy cap as a Bard. So you really want to head to, if you're not sure which one to pick, you should check out just your official class forums on the Square Enix site. On pretty much, if you click on roles and then your class, you'll see that pretty much every class is a thread for Alagan versus Artifact Armor 2 comparison. So you'll know the best AF2 pieces to get. You'll know the best Alagan pieces to get, so you don't waste your points every week. And I would mention in particular too that you don't want to necessarily, you always want to maximize your item level. You know, if it's a choice between AF2, Alagan, or Darklight, the obvious answer is to go for the item level 90 piece. You know, you don't want to, if you have, let's say you have a full gear set, you have one piece of Darklight, and you have 900 tombstones. You're going to want to spend those tombstones to get the AF2 in that Darklight slot rather than wait for the ideal Alagan drop and replace one of your allot, and instead use the points to replace an Alagan drop with AF2. That's just a waste. And the differences are so minor that really your goal should be to wear AF2 no matter what. AF2 or Alagan. So I hope that cleared up some issues with the secondary stats. Again, accuracy up to cap, 491 for physical DPS, 435 for casters. After that, determination is almost always your next best stat. Critical hit rate and skill speed depends on the class. Neither one is, critical hit rate in particular is not a very strong stat, surprisingly. As gear gets better, I'm sure this will get better as well. But for some classes like Bard, skill speed is not very useful. So, you know, use that information how you will. Like I said, if my skill speed was any faster, I would drain my TP in any long fight, so it's just not beneficial. So just keep that in mind when gearing your character. Accuracy cap first, determination second, attack, skill speed and critical hit rate depends on class dependent. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the physical, or for the adventuring classes, we'll say. I'm not sure if I talked, oh yeah, I should talk about healers and tanks. Healers obviously want to focus on spell speed and determination. I mean, critical hit rate is okay. Usually critical hits on heals, it's not really something you really want to depend on if you can help it. It's better than nothing, but I personally, as a healer, I've always preferred, you know, whatever's the most reliable, spell speed and determination. Obviously, healing magic potency is going to be increased by mind. That's always beneficial, but it's not necessarily a secondary stat. For tanks, you know, you're just going to want to max out your vitality as a priority. If you wear AF2 or Alagan pieces, these stats are going to take care of themselves. So let's discuss crafting and gathering now. So for craft, they're a lot simpler. So if you're on the, you know, my leather worker here, the only important stats are craftsmanship, control, and CP. So when it comes to these stats, craftsmanship is the least important. Control and CP are the most important. And the reason for this is that, let's say we have an item like this, you'll see that the last materia I added on provides 3 craftsmanship. And it's only a level 1 materia, it's very cheap. You can stick these level 1 materia into any of your pieces to hit the craftsmanship cap. I mean, I'm still gearing up this character. As you can see, I've geared out the jewelry this way, and my wristlets, and my necklace, and my belt, so I can use them on all my crafting classes, but I haven't really gotten a chance to put much money into the other slots yet. I'm still saving. I need about 1.5 million to kind of cap out everything the way I want. So what your materia, you know, your materia really needs to focus on control and CP as much as you can. I mean, certain pieces are capped, and the other reason, this is going to be really sad, but I messed this up when I was running through. I accidentally binded a level 1 materia to this chest piece. I ruined it, and it's already got a +6 craftsmanship in it. So it's a waste of 150k or so. But anyway, this is important because... sorry about that, I had to sneeze. The chest piece can hold up to 16 craftsmanship. So just sticking these level 1 materia on the end of a lot of your items like this, and then maxing out the shirt or the chest piece, that's all you really need to do to hit about 357 or 360 craftsmanship. Beyond that, it doesn't really do anything for you, and it's just so easy to hit. Like this is materialist. I could put +3/+3 on all of these pieces. It would be hardly any investment because that materia is just so cheap. So focus on CP and control. Those are really what's going to make you get the high quality items. That's where you want to put most of your money in your spending. As you can see, I've definitely put some effort to max out the CP and control of these items. I mean, craftsmanship, you take it where you can get it, but it's usually one of the last materia to go on. Okay, so now we're going to discuss gathering, and this is not, as you can see, I don't have full HQ gear. My miner kind of gave up on it once I realized how little gil is possible with this class. I do not recommend mining to anyone. If you are, going to get into crafting or even just regular farming, I find that mining is just a waste of time. But I will discuss its stats anyway if you want to try to prove me wrong. And what you'll find is that with gathering, and I've been looking at it, if I was to try to make money off of gathering, my ideal would be to only go for 320 perception, which would require nothing. It would just require having a full HQ set, and then I would try to push my gathering to 340. What this would do is, this would allow me to have 85% chance to harvest a level 85 item. You can use your plus 15% chance to gather skill. That will give you 100% chance to mine any HQ item. That's your ideal. But after that, it's nothing's too important. 500. You only need, if we're going to use Toll of the Mountaineer and then Sharp Vision 2, that's going to give us 100% chance to mine. I'll get 6 attempts off. I can use Deep Vigor for free, get a guaranteed HQ, and that's good for anything that gives 3 items per attempt. A lot of the level 50 items do that. If it's just a level 1 item though, you're going to want up to 600 CP if you're going to go for things like clusters, because then you can use Sharp Vision, King's Yield, and get 15 clusters per attempt. I mean, that makes mining somewhat more interesting, since like Earth and Wind clusters can be worth a couple hundred gil apiece, and you can get 15 per round. It's worth 5k or so every time the timer comes around. It's still just not worth it to me, but if you do get those stats, you can get up to 600 CP, but I almost think that your best bet is to just do nothing, bind the minimal gathering materia to all your items, and then use these to actually convert them into materia every time you hit the spirit bind cap. I think that's going to be your best bet, is try to farm materia with mining or botany. I think that's what's going to bring in the most money, rather than investing a bunch of gil in materia for this, because then you won't be able to convert the pieces. So that's really it for the attributes guide, and this is pretty long, but we tried to cram every class in, and I hope it was helpful for you. You should now know pretty much what you should focus on. The only area of confusion might be whether or not to get a login or AF2 in a specific slot. I mean, that's kind of a high quality problem now. It's like, oh, I've got to choose between 2 great items. So if you get to that point, you can visit the class forums on the official site, and there's practically guaranteed to be a guide on there about which one you should pick. So look into that, and hope this was helpful for you, and stick around for the next one.